Snow drove hard across the plains, lashing against the crooked timbers of a lone cabin. The door rattled with each gust, as though the wind itself demanded entry. Inside, by the flickering glow of a meager fire, sat Clara Whitfield. Her hands, calloused from years of labor, trembled as she tried to sew a tear in her threadbare shawl. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, but worse than hunger was the silence, the endless, merciless quiet of a frontier winter. It had been 4 months since her husband, Samuel, had been crushed beneath a fallen pine while logging for the railroad. The memory was still raw, his lifeless body dragged home on a sled, his face pale against the backdrop of snow. She buried him herself, breaking the frozen earth with blistered hands until her knuckles bled. Now the cabin felt less like shelter and more like a tomb. Each corner whispered with emptiness. Each board creaked with loneliness. The world beyond her window was merciless. Wolves had been seen prowling near the tree line. Her nearest neighbor lived 15 miles east, across a river now choked with ice. Supplies from the trading post had run thin. The flour barrel lay empty but for dust, and only 2 jars of beans sat on the shelf. Her last chicken had frozen to death the week before, and Clara, with tears in her eyes, had plucked and eaten it in silence. She tried to stay strong. Samuel had always said she had more grit than most men in town. But grit didn't fill a belly. Grit didn't keep the wolves at bay. And grit couldn't stop the cold that seeped into her bones at night when she lay shivering beneath patched quilts, her breath rising in frosty clouds. She sat at the table and stared at Samuel's rifle, propped against the wall. The weapon seemed to mock her. She knew how to use it. Every frontier wife did, but bullets were precious, and hunting in this weather meant risking death. More than once, she had considered turning the barrel on herself, if only to escape the suffering. But each time the thought came, Samuel's voice echoed in her memory. "You're stronger than you think, Clara. Don't you forget that." One evening, while gathering firewood, she noticed something strange, a set of tracks in the snow. They weren't animal prints, too straight, too deliberate. Boot tracks. Someone had passed near her cabin. Her heart leapt with a wild mix of fear and hope. Could it be a passing trapper? Or a drifter, maybe dangerous, maybe desperate? She followed them a short distance, but the wind quickly erased the trail, sweeping snow across it like a curtain pulled shut. That night, unease gnawed at her more than hunger. She kept the rifle close, listening for the snap of branches or the crunch of footsteps. The wind howled like a chorus of lost souls, and the walls groaned under the weight of snow. She whispered a prayer, though she wasn't sure God still heard her this far from civilization. The next morning, she stepped outside to find a fresh rabbit lying neatly on her doorstep, its fur white as the snow around it. For a long moment, she simply stared. She hadn't trapped it. She hadn't even seen game in weeks. Slowly, she bent down, her eyes sweeping the tree line. The forest stood silent, dark and endless. Her hand shook as she picked up the rabbit. Who had left it? Why? The tracks were there again, boot prints leading away into the trees. Someone was out there, watching. Clara carried the rabbit inside, her mind racing. She wanted to believe it was kindness, some nameless soul offering help. But on the frontier, kindness was rare. More often, men took what they wanted by force. Was she being toyed with, watched for weakness? Or had Providence, in her darkest hour, sent an unseen hand to keep her alive? She dressed the rabbit carefully, whispering a thank you to whoever, or whatever, had provided it. As the meat simmered over the fire, she closed her eyes and inhaled the smell, tears stinging her eyes. For the first time in weeks, she would eat something more than stale beans. But she also knew this was only the beginning. Someone was near. Someone who could change everything, for better or for far worse. The days that followed blurred into a haze of snow and silence. Yet Clara could not shake the feeling that eyes lingered in the shadows beyond her cabin walls. Each morning she scanned the frostbitten world outside, and each morning she found signs, boot prints pressed deep in the snow, sometimes leading to her barn, sometimes circling her well. Whoever he was, he moved like a ghost, leaving only faint traces before vanishing into the trees. At first, fear anchored itself in her chest. On the frontier, men were not always kind. Desperation drove them to cruelty, and widows, especially alone and vulnerable, were easy prey. She kept Samuel's rifle close, sleeping with it beside her, her finger twitching at every creak of the timbers. The wilderness was already cruel. The thought of bandits or drifters added another layer of dread. Then came the second offering. A neat stack of chopped firewood appeared beside her door one dawn, the edges squared clean as though carved by a practiced hand. Clara stepped out, her breath curling in the air, and stood frozen. The wood hadn't been there the night before. No sound had woken her. Whoever left it had worked in silence, close enough to touch her door, yet she had never stirred. She felt her skin prickle, torn between gratitude and terror. By the third day, another gift appeared, a rabbit, skinned this time, laid carefully upon a cloth. The work was precise, efficient, not the hand of a brute. Whoever this stranger was, he knew survival. Clara stared at it for a long while, her lips trembling. The gesture seemed too deliberate, too purposeful, to be chance. That night, as the storm shrieked outside, she paced the cabin, her mind a battlefield. Was this man planning to lull her into comfort before striking? Or was he, in his own silent way, choosing to keep her alive? The answer came in violence. A sharp growl shattered the night. Clara bolted upright, snatching her rifle. From the dark beyond her window came the sound of claws against wood, wolves drawn by the scent of meat. Their howls rose, circling the cabin. Clara's pulse thundered in her ears as she loaded the rifle with trembling hands. She fired once through the window. A yelp split the storm. The others snarled in answer, slamming against the cabin walls. She backed toward the fire, readying another round, when the door suddenly burst inward. Not from the wolves, but from a man. He moved like a shadow, tall and broad, his face half hidden by a scarf, eyes burning sharp beneath a battered hat. A long knife glinted in his hand. Clara stumbled back, raising the rifle, but before she could fire, he lunged past her. The cabin erupted in chaos. A wolf crashed through the broken doorway, fangs flashing. The stranger met it mid-leap, driving his knife deep into its throat. The animal thrashed, blood spraying across the floor, but the man did not falter. Another wolf forced its way through the shattered frame, only to meet the butt of his rifle. Clara stood frozen, torn between horror and awe, before she remembered herself and fired. The shot echoed through the cabin, and the wolf collapsed in a heap. Silence fell, broken only by the hiss of the fire and the ragged breaths of the stranger. He wiped his blade clean on his coat, then glanced at her. For the first time, she saw his face, scarred, weathered, a man shaped by war or wilderness. He said nothing, only gave a single, curt nod, then turned to leave. "Wait," Clara whispered, but the word felt too fragile in the heavy air. He stepped into the storm as silently as he had come. By the time Clara gathered the courage to follow, the night had swallowed him whole. The next morning, she found the wolves' bodies dragged away, their bloodstains already fading beneath fresh snow. Near her door rested another stack of firewood, taller this time. The man was no bandit. That much she knew now. But what he wanted, why he lingered near her cabin, helping yet refusing to speak, remained as mysterious as the endless wilderness itself. Still, Clara noticed the fear in her chest had shifted. Where once she had felt only dread, now flickered something else. The faintest spark of trust, fragile as the flame that kept her cabin alive. Winter tightened its grip until every breath burned like ice. The snow rose higher than the windowsills, and the wind screamed as though the world itself wished to tear Clara's cabin apart. Days blended into nights, marked only by the endless task of feeding the fire. Clara and the stranger, her silent guardian, were trapped together, the storm sealing the door with drifts of white. At first, their company was uneasy. He spoke little, offering only gruff nods or brief glances. His hands were always busy, mending broken shutters, reinforcing the roof, cleaning Samuel's rifle with a soldier's precision. Clara longed to know who he was, but questions died on her tongue. There was a heaviness about him, a silence that seemed less chosen than endured. Food grew scarce despite his skill at hunting. Rabbits became rare, deer vanished into the deeper woods, and Clara counted each remaining jar of beans like they were gold coins. One evening, her stomach hollow with hunger, she confessed her darkest thought. "I buried Samuel myself," she said, staring into the fire. "I dug until my hands bled, and when I lowered him into the ground, I wondered if it was my fault. If I had begged him not to work that day, maybe he'd still be alive." The stranger paused, his scarred hands stilling on the rifle stock. For the first time since he arrived, he spoke, his voice low and gravelly, as if dragged across stones. "I buried a wife and 2 sons. War took them, and I weren't there to stop it." Clara looked at him, startled by the crack in his armor. His eyes stayed fixed on the flames, distant, haunted. "You can't carry it," he said quietly. "Not forever, or it'll bury you too." The words settled in her like a seed, painful yet oddly comforting. For the first time, she didn't feel entirely alone in her grief. But grief had little time to rest. Trouble came on horseback. It was midday when the crunch of hooves broke through the storm's lull. Clara's heart stuttered. The stranger's hand moved instantly to his rifle, his posture sharp. Through the frosted glass, shapes emerged, for men, their coats tattered, faces hidden beneath wide-brimmed hats. Bandits. They rode straight for the cabin. Clara's blood ran cold. Men like these didn't come for neighborly visits. The leader, a gaunt man with a jagged scar across his cheek, dismounted first. His voice rang out over the wind, sharp as broken glass. "Ma'am, we reckon you got supplies in there. Hand 'em over, and maybe we'll leave your pretty house standing." Clara's hands trembled on her rifle. The stranger motioned her back, stepping into the doorway. His silence was answer enough, and the scarred man laughed, the sound cruel. "You got steel in you, don't ya?" he sneered. "Well, steel bleeds same as flesh. Burn her out, boys." 2 of the outlaws swung torches from their saddlebags, sparks flaring in the cold air. Clara's breath caught. Her cabin, her last link to Samuel, was about to be turned to ash. Then thunder cracked. The stranger's rifle spoke first, dropping a man clean from his saddle. Chaos exploded. Bullets screamed through the storm. Clara ducked behind the table, her heart pounding, ears ringing. The stranger moved with lethal precision, each shot measured, each step calm. But the bandits pressed hard, their bullets splintering wood, shattering the window glass. One torch arced through the air, landing on the porch. Flames licked hungrily at the wood. Clara, desperate, grabbed her bucket and flung snow upon it, stamping it out with her boots. A shot whistled past her head, close enough to scorch her hair. She spun and fired blindly through the window. A scream answered, followed by the thud of a body in the snow. The battle dragged on in thunder and smoke. At last, silence fell. Clara, chest heaving, dared to peek outside. 2 bandits lay still in the snow, their blood steaming against the cold. A third staggered off into the forest, leaving a trail that faded into white. The leader, scarred and snarling, clutched his wounded arm as he galloped away, his threats trailing behind him like smoke. "You'll pay for this. You'll both pay." The stranger lowered his rifle slowly, his chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. Then he swayed, knees buckling. Clara rushed to him just as crimson bloomed across his side. "You're hurt," she gasped, catching his weight. His eyes fluttered, but he gave a faint smile, grim and weary. "Better me than you." He collapsed in her arms, blood seeping hot against her hands as the storm howled outside. The fight was over, for now, but the danger was far from gone. The winter still raged, the bandits still lived, and the stranger who had kept her alive now lay broken, his life hanging by a thread. The cabin was quiet except for the ragged sound of his breathing. Clara worked through the night, pressing torn cloth against his wound, praying the bleeding would slow. Her hands shook, but she forced them steady. She had stitched Samuel's shirts, she had mended hides. She would not fail this man now. The firelight painted his scarred face in harsh shadows, and for the first time she realized how worn he looked, as if every mile of hardship had carved itself into his skin. By dawn, the storm had passed. Snow lay heavy on the world, glittering like shards of glass beneath a pale sun. The stranger slept, his chest rising shallow but steady. Clara stepped outside, exhaustion weighing her down. The air was brittle, sharp in her lungs. She half expected to see bandits lurking at the tree line, but the forest stood still, blanketed in silence. And then she saw it. By her door sat a stack of burlap sacks, larger than anything she had ever owned. She froze, her breath caught in her throat. With trembling hands, she pulled at the cord of the nearest sack. Gold. Raw, heavy gold. Nuggets and dust glinted in the morning light, enough to buy 100 lifetimes of food and safety. She stumbled back, heart racing. 200 pounds, maybe more. Her first thought was madness. Had the bandits returned? Had they meant to mock her? But no, their kind took, never gave. She turned slowly toward the cabin. The stranger still lay within, unconscious, but his rifle leaned carefully against the doorframe. And there, carved into a rough piece of wood left atop the sacks, were 2 words for your survival. Clara's knees weakened. She sank into the snow, staring at the impossible fortune before her. Why? Why would a man she did not know, a man who owed her nothing, give up a treasure that could change the course of any life? She returned inside, the note clutched tight. He stirred when she touched his shoulder, his eyes fluttering open. She wanted to demand answers, but when she looked into his weary gaze, the questions died on her lips. His expression carried a truth she could not name, a burden too heavy to speak. Days passed. His strength returned little by little, though he never explained. He spoke only once more of it, when Clara pressed the issue, her voice breaking. Why leave it? Why me? He met her eyes, and in his silence was the weight of wars fought, families lost, debts that could never be repaid. Finally, he whispered, because you'll use it to live, not to waste. Then, as suddenly as he had come, he was gone. One morning Clara rose to find his bed empty, his footprints already fading into the endless snow. He had taken nothing. No food, no supplies, not even a word of farewell. Only the gold remained, gleaming in the half-light like a cruel miracle. Spring came at last. Clara traded part of the treasure for seed, livestock, and tools. Her farm grew strong, her table full again. She gave to neighbors, to the church, to families poorer than her own. The town whispered of her sudden fortune, weaving tales of secret mines and hidden inheritances. Clara said nothing. But every evening, as the sun sank behind the pines, she stood at the edge of her land and looked to the forest, wondering if she would see him again. She never did. Yet she carried him with her, the scarred face, the silent strength, the kindness wrapped in mystery. Gold had saved her body, but the stranger had saved her soul. And so, when her children's children asked how she survived the harshest winter of her life, she told them not of hunger, or wolves, or bandits, but of a nameless man who left more than riches at her door. He left proof that in the wild heart of the frontier, even in the darkest times, humanity could shine brighter than gold. And if you've walked this far with Clara's story, through hunger, fear, and the mercy of a stranger, then you know the frontier was never just about land and wealth. It was about resilience, about sacrifice, about the mysteries that shaped lives in ways no ledger could record. If this tale moved you, if it stirred something within you, then join us again here on Frontier Tales. Like, comment, and subscribe so that the stories of grit, sorrow, and the unyielding spirit of the West will never be forgotten.